Hello everybody, and thank you for joining us today for our Microsoft Azure webinar. Today we'll be joined by John Garidis from Byte Software Services and Dan Scarf from .NET Solutions.
Right, good morning everyone. My name is John Garidis and I work for Byte Software Services. So quite often when we see clients for the first time, they ask us, what is actually the cloud? Can you tell me what cloud is? And as you can see, this graph, which took us a very long time to produce, is basically an elevator pitch of what cloud is. So the cloud is everywhere. It's coming to define everything we do in IT. And it is about people from, individuals like myself or developers working from anywhere, using any device they like and running any application of their choice. And obviously they want to access the data in a secure manner. But also for developers like to use the tools that they're familiar with and they have experience in it. And also they want to be able to spin an environment quickly, do the UAT test and then spin it down without having to wait for IT to provision that. But also think of the IT managers. I don't know how many of you in the call are IT managers, but I used to be one, and it was a very hard job because you never got thanked for the work you did, even if you worked late in the evening or the weekend. But if anything goes wrong, you're the first one to know. And that means that with a cloud solution, this problem goes away to a certain extent because Microsoft deals with the infrastructure. And that means that the IT managers can focus in driving business needs and instead of maintaining systems and patching servers. Now, are you empowered to react, or is your company empowered to react at a moment's notice and thrive in today's complex environment? What we found is that the business that adapt to change and capitalize on the new opportunities that this change gives them, they not only survive, but they thrive in this environment. Let me give you an example. Blockbuster, and I'm sure you know Netflix as well. Back in 2002, Blockbuster was the premium brand. They used to be the #1 for video and film rental, and they were capitalized over $6 billion. At that precise moment, about October 2002, a little unknown company called Netflix went to IPO. They only had about 50 or so employees, and in fact the shares prior to IPO were trading at $13. Immediately post-IPO went down to $8. So you can see what confidence the market had for them at that time. Move the clock forward 8 years from then. So in 2010, Blockbuster went bankrupt. They filed for Chapter 11, and Netflix was valued then at $6.5 billion. Its value is valued a lot more now. Basically, the key lesson to take away from this is that no matter how successful you are today, tomorrow brings no guarantees. In fact, only today in the Telegraph, I was reading about Spotify. They are now the market leader, and they are preparing for a flotation. I mean, where were they a few years ago? I mean, you wouldn't bet much on them, and now they are the premium brand in downstream. I don't know if you know Satya Nadella, but he's the CEO for Microsoft. I think has been on the job for about 9 months or so. And what he says is that he believes that in the future we won't be thinking of servers and hardware and software, but we'll be thinking of a ubiquitous computing environment that is provided by the cloud, giving you incredible computing capacity and accommodating your ever-growing needs for connectivity, devices, and giving you insight to how you use the systems and the software. Now, in terms of Microsoft, they basically categorize themselves into 4 workloads: productivity, social, insights, and platform. I'm going to call out a few of them. So in terms of productivity, obviously people are aware of Office, but are you aware that Office 365, which was only launched really 3-4 years ago, it's now the #1, well, in 1 in 4 organizations is used, and it has reached about 125 markets, and it takes about 60% of the Fortune 500 companies. that is only in a very short space of time. If you look at social, Yammer, it's got 8 million plus existing users, and OneDrive, over 250 million users. All that is part of the new social media and collaboration that Microsoft is bringing to market. And of course, with the acquisition of Skype, it gives you enormous social and connectivity and collaboration capability. Looking at data insights, SQL is the #1 rated and the highest rated database in the cloud. Now, if you're looking at the platform as well, people quite often ask us, or they perceive that Microsoft hasn't been in the cloud for very long, but they have been doing cloud services, Hotmail for example, for over 10 years. In fact, Xbox Live has got over 48 million worldwide users, and Windows Azure has already captured 50% of the Fortune 500 companies. What I'd like to do now is pass you over to Dan, who's going to talk to us about more in depth about the cloud.
Thanks, John. Morning, everyone. So that's sort of a bit of background in terms of what Microsoft defines as the cloud, some of the products that they have. So now we're going to sort of go into a little bit more detail around some of the use cases that we're seeing customers using Azure for, and some of the things where it might be a good fit for your organizations. So as we look at this slide here, you can see there are a whole range of different things that you can use the cloud for across these sort of 4 main areas of productivity, social, insights, and platform. And I won't sort of read through all of these, you can see them on the screen, but I mean some of the most important ones that we're seeing, acquiring new customers is really, really key for a lot of the customers that we work with, looking at how they can redefine their business processes, looking at how they can place technology right at the very core of what they do. I mean, John mentioned a few examples of companies that perhaps haven't taken that big step and perhaps some of the results that have come to them. So, it's really important you look at technology as a very core part of your business. Cloud also helps in terms of, making your employees far more productive. This digitalization that we're seeing of the workplace, these tools that customers have available and employees have available outside of work, now starting to come into work. This idea of business agility as well is something we're seeing as really, really successful. So, being able to go from a concept which somebody dreams up to an actual POC through to customers having their hands on, in the space of months or even weeks. How we can talk to customers in a much more personalized way, using things like big data so we can analyze all of the experiences and all of the click-throughs that other customers might have done and put together that real personalized experience. And the last 2 are all around application development and scaling. Again, as we start to put technology right into the very core of our organization, application development and owning IP is something which is becoming more and more important to organizations, and having a responsive infrastructure that you can place that onto that can scale up and scale down as that demand is required can be a really, really powerful solution. We can jump on to the next slide. So if we look across the marketplace, we're seeing huge change going on. We're seeing primarily a whole new breed of applications which are coming online. Satya talks about this cloud-first, mobile-first vision, and we're seeing this across all of our customers, that getting these applications onto these new devices, getting access to data wherever an employee might need to be, can really empower them and can really increase their productivity. So those new apps are driving a proliferation of different devices, from phones through phablets, through tablets, through convertible, through ultra lightweight laptops. So having access to this data wherever you are. Of course, this is then driving an absolute explosion in the amount of data which is required to be accessed, but also required to be stored. And ultimately, cloud is emerging as the sort of de facto solution to a lot of those challenges, from deploying the apps, managing the devices, and then storing all of that huge amount of data. Next slide. And from a technology standpoint, we're seeing three main things, again, driving this huge move to the cloud. The first one we're seeing is huge engineering work and huge progress which is being made in the compute sphere. So I don't know if any of you have ever seen any of these big global data centers that run these public clouds, but they are absolutely enormous. There's huge amounts of innovation which is going into the actual engineering of these facilities. We're seeing much higher density in terms of the way that servers are actually deployed into those data centers. We're also seeing a huge amount of software being applied to those data centers. Lots of people ask me the whole time, this cloud thing is not new. It used to be called ASP back in the day. What's all the fuss about? And I say, well, all the fuss is about actually the fact that we're now using software to run these data centers. You go into Microsoft's facility in Dublin, as I said, it's absolutely vast. There are only 7 people that work on the data center floors inside that facility because it's all based on software. Kind of interesting that the big cloud players are not the kind of people that you might expect. It's not the, oops, sorry, go back. It's not the hardware manufacturers. It's software companies. It's Microsoft, it's Amazon, it's Google. Because all of this innovation is coming from the software side, not necessarily the hardware side. What we're also seeing then from a storage perspective is the cost just absolutely falling through the floor. Again, going back to this idea of software-defined data centers, rather than having really expensive hardware-based SANs with all of that high availability and fault tolerance within the actual hardware, we're seeing that move up into the software layer. So using commodity storage equipment, which we fully expect to fail, but having that redundancy at the software layer, so actually that failure is completely invisible to you as a user. And then the final piece we're seeing is massive advances on the networking standpoint. Again, it used to be that you had to have really expensive hardware-based managed switches and routers and lots of Cisco and Juniper kit at uber expense. Actually, all of that now is going away as well. So all of that networking is now done from a software perspective. You can just say, here's my network, here's how it's defined, here's my connection to on-premises. And all of that then is just done effectively by the operating system without all of this expensive hardware. Next slide. And we're seeing this really translating into the real world. I mean, this article's a couple of months old now, but I think it still makes a really important point. Why did IBM dump its commodity server business? Well, it's because ultimately there's no money to be made now selling servers to enterprises to use on-premise, because the vast majority of those enterprises are going to be moving to public clouds over the coming years. Just press the button. Now, of course, they clearly made a typing mistake when they said Amazon. It was absolutely Windows Azure that they were talking about. But again, it kind of gives you the idea. Press the button again. And when organizations are moving to the public cloud, we're seeing these 3 main things as the key drivers behind that. And the top one, and probably the most important of those, is speed. And that goes back to that innovation point again. It used to be that organizations, had many years to start to think about how they might transform themselves to work in this new digitized world. Now that time has been reduced and reduced and reduced because all of these startups, all these new organizations coming on board have access to all of this public cloud as well. So they can bring solutions to market much, much more quickly, which means that enterprises also need to have that speed. The scale piece is equally as important. So this talks both about this ability to be able to scale up and scale down to deal with changing requirements, but it also talks about that ability to be able to scale around the world. It used to be that, perhaps if the UK was your main market, that would be where you would focus all of your energies. Now in this new globalized world, if you're building IT solutions and online-based services, it can sometimes be just as easy to sell those abroad as it is in the UK. But you need to have that global platform where you can deploy stuff to service Europe, America, Asia as quickly and simply as deploying stuff into the UK. And then the final piece then is the economic argument. If you look at the cost of running a public cloud infrastructure versus the cost of what that might look like on-premise, we're seeing huge cost savings for organizations. It depends on the scenario. I mean, there are some things where it's still a bit closer to on-premise, but for the right scenario, you can be saving 60 or 80% of your costs by moving to the public cloud. So when we talk about cloud, we're talking very much around a combination of this public and private cloud. There are still going to be a number of workloads which are going to remain on-premise for an amount of time to come. That might be for security reasons, it might be for performance reasons, but we also think that there are a number of workloads which you can move to the public cloud. So when we're talking to customers, we always pitch things in terms of this hybrid deployment model. That's not to say you can't go 100% cloud, you absolutely can, but the real world dictates that for an amount of time you will have to have things in both these two different worlds. So we think that's a real advantage of choosing Microsoft as your cloud infrastructure provider. So when we talk about this hybrid cloud, we talk about something which we call Cloud OS. And the idea behind Cloud OS is to have that consistent experience wherever your applications and services are deployed. You'll continue to have things in the top where it says customer on-premise. You'll continue to have things probably with service providers, so with traditional hosting companies, and you'll also have things running on Windows Azure. But wherever you have those things running, you should have a flexible development model. You should have unified management. You should have a common identity model. You should have integrated virtualization. You should have a complete data platform. So wherever it makes most sense to sit that particular application, you can seamlessly move it about without any trade-offs, without any complications. So that's sort of, again, a little bit of background. Now we can start to talk about specifics of where we're seeing customers using Azure. And probably the top one that we're seeing at the moment is all around thinking about Azure as simply an extension to your internal infrastructure. So you'll have a bunch of servers on-premise, you might have some servers with a service provider at the moment, but by using Azure's infrastructure as a service capability, you can seamlessly extend that out into Azure using a site-to-site connection or a dedicated link up to Azure. You can define all of your networking up on Azure, so when users are on-premise and they want to access a server which is in Azure, they just go to it as if it was part of your internal infrastructure. They'd have no idea they were actually going out to a Microsoft data center to get some of that. And from a management perspective, we can actually then see both of those two different worlds with one common pane of glass. The next one we're seeing lots of customers looking at the cloud for is DR. Disaster recovery is something we all know we should do, and most of us probably do. Probably fewer of us have actually had to test it for real. It's also something which can be very, very expensive for an organization to provision. Hopefully 99.9% of the time, all of that infrastructure sits there idle, but when you need it, and you need it quickly. So using Azure, you can stand up all of your infrastructure in this public cloud. You can either have that infrastructure running in a warm state with continuous replication going on, or you can have it in a cold state ready so that as soon as you press a button, all of that infrastructure comes online. We've got a complete staged DR failover, so there's a complete wizard that you can go and run which says, these servers have to come up first, then these servers have to come up. You can have decision points and action points which have to happen as part of that DR. But ultimately, you can get to a point where, even from a cold state, you can have all of your infrastructure up and running in, a matter of minutes. And the great thing is, of course, you're only paying in that DR scenario. So hopefully, you're paying very, very little to have this solution up and available to you. The next big thing that we're seeing is all around managing mobile workers. We touched earlier on this, proliferation of devices and proliferation of apps that run on these new devices. How do you support all of those devices? How do you support all of those applications? So Microsoft have recently released something called the Enterprise Mobility Suite. And the Enterprise Mobility Suite is made up of 4 key components. So the first one is all around rights management, so an ability to be able to publish out all of your data, all of your documents, all of your email, in a very, very secure manner. So you can have information rights management policies. So a user in Outlook, for instance, could say, well, this email can't be printed, this email can't be forwarded, and all of that is then adhered to by any device that receives that email. You can do the same with Office 365, SharePoint Online. So again, for a particular document, you could say only these users are allowed to access that document, and even if that document, for instance, is emailed out to someone, all of that rights management is baked into the actual document, so there's no way that that can leak outside of your organization. So you can have all of the benefits of this mobile workforce without any of the risks that you might associate with having all of this data out on those devices. The next piece of it is all around single sign-on. So again, there's been this proliferation of software as a service applications which business units might have gone and bought. How, as an IT department, can we secure access to all of those applications and ideally make it so that users can use their Active Directory credentials to log on to all of these systems? Now, many of these systems have AD integration, and you can set them up on a kind of app-by-app basis, but it's a very slow process, and there can potentially be security risks associated with doing that. With the new single sign-on service, or access panel as it's called, you can centrally manage access to all of those applications, and you can do it based on groups and departments and so forth, and there's over 1,000 SaaS applications which are supported right out of the box. So if any of you are familiar with solutions like Ping Identity, for instance, this very much competes with those. And then the final piece then we've got is two-factor authentication. Again, usernames and passwords can be perhaps not most secure when we're dealing with these mobile workers, but using this two-factor authentication service, users will either be prompted to use their phone, so an app on the actual phone to get that second form of authentication. It can text the users, or it can call the users, and that two-factor authentication service can be used to secure access to both cloud applications, but also you can deploy a Radius server on-premise and again use that to secure access to all of your on-premise solutions as well. The final piece, we've got remote password reset and group management in this as well. So some of these are part of something which is called Windows Azure Active Directory Premium. So again, if you're struggling with password reset, that's kind of baked into this. So that's the first half of it, and then the second half of it, some of you might be familiar with Microsoft's MDM solution, which is Intune. So that provides full device management across Windows, iOS, and Android. It can do remote wide, all the things that you'd expect. It's also got app management and catalog, so kind of like an enterprise app store for all of your internal applications. And for your desktop users, you can do remote support as well, so sort of remotely logging on to users' laptops to help them sort out problems. Intune is unified with System Center Configuration Manager as well, so you can seamlessly manage all of your internal infrastructure and devices and all of your mobile devices as well. So all of this is all part of the Enterprise Mobility Suite. If you're interested in any more information on this, then please do get in contact. There's a great offer which is running at the moment, and you can get all of this functionality for a tiny amount of money compared to sort of competing solutions from other vendors. Moving on to the next slide. And then the final piece that we're seeing customers use the cloud for is a global networking solution. So you might have users, services, applications all around the world. How can you provide access to all of those? So Microsoft recently just released something called ExpressRoute. So ExpressRoute allows you to have dedicated lease line connections into all of Microsoft's global data centers. You can either do that using a sort of meet me fiber hotel type approach, so you can get equipment into one of our partner data centers and then effectively just have an Ethernet connection into Azure. Or alternatively, if you already have an MPLS provider, you can just take a tail straight off that MPLS provider straight into Azure. So really, really quick and simple to get up and going, and you can have up to a 10 gig connection into the Azure data centers. Once you're into the Azure data centers, depending on how your solution is designed, you can then use Microsoft's private network to do your backhaul between all of these different data centers to make sure you've got uber high performance for your users. You can then use that as well as part of your DR strategy, so you can have all of your different services deployed into different data centers and do seamless failover between all of those. Next slide, and then I think it's back over to John.
Still says red. Okay, hi. So I just want to cover through the latest releases. Those releases were released in May this year, and basically, as you might know, Azure does releases quite often, but this was a major release, and the announcements were around virtual machines as well as the additional anti-malware and anti-spam services you could buy. So as well as the Microsoft one that they're provided with Azure, you can also get Symantec endpoint protection and also Trend Micro's Deep Security Agent. And the Trend Micro one provides also encryption, as you might know. In terms of virtual machines, you can now capture virtual machines that contain both the operating system disk and multiple data disks as well. And the capture command can now be run both on stopped VMs, but also VMs that are actually running. So you don't have to actually stop your VM to actually move it across. And if you want to restart it, the capture command completes it under 1 minute, so it is very, very fast. The other one is ExpressRoute, which obviously Dan covered, but I just want to deep dive a little bit more about the different options you have with ExpressRoute. You can use the MPLS connection, which can be provided, for example, here in the UK by BT. But you also, if you have, in terms of connectivity to the data center, you can have a virtual point-to-point VPN connectivity. You can have a virtual network site-to-site VPN, and of course the ExpressRoute, which, as Dan said, can be up to 10 gigabytes. So for the first two, obviously, you can have active-passive configuration, connectivity, but for ExpressRoute, especially the 10 gigabit one, you can have active configuration. And of course, the other thing that you also get with that is the internal load balancing, which comes part of the service. Now, the next one that I was going to talk about is the Microsoft storage, which comes with, as well as obviously the general availability of the SMB file sharing support, which effectively makes it very easy to lift and shift applications. In fact, the import-export service enables you, if you have large amounts of data that you want to move to Azure, then you can use this import-export service, which is part of a wizard, and you can actually you can ship disks effectively using FedEx, for example. The SMB file sharing service, it enables applications running both in Azure as well as on-prem in the Windows Server environment or Linux VM, and you can share the same SMB file sharing service. So you can have VMs running both in Azure and on your premises, either in Linux or Windows environment, and both having read-write access to the files. The other one is Remote App Application Service, and that uses RDP. So effectively, what you are able to do, if you have RDP licenses, your employees can simply install RDP, and then on their mobile devices or their Windows devices, and then they can access applications, or optionally connect to applications to the backend system provided by your on-premises data center. It supports hybrid connections as well, so you can easily integrate to allow Windows websites and mobile services, and you can access them both on premises and access resources that are on premises, or if they're located in the cloud. So this makes it much easier to move applications to the cloud while still connecting securely to the existing enterprise assets. bStock is used primarily behind the scenes. In terms of cache, there was an announcement about Redis cache service. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's a very extensive service which is supported now. And in terms of the store, there's a Windows store where you can buy additional applications provided by third parties. That wasn't available for enterprise customers, but this has now been released. So if you're an enterprise customer with Azure, you can access that. Basically it's like an online store. Finally, one of the applications that we've seen that is getting a lot of traction is AppZero. AppZero effectively moves enterprise server applications running on old Windows 2003 servers into Azure, and it does it in a very easy. In fact, you don't have to make any changes to your applications, which is basically what stops a lot of customers the testing of those applications in the new environment. And AppZero, we have actually done an exclusive deal with the vendor of AppZero to provide this as a service to our clients that they want to migrate to Azure. So it automates the extraction and movement of Windows product server applications from the source machine on premises in 2003 environment to Windows Azure running 2012. Now, so if we were to summarize the webinar so far, Microsoft Azure is an enterprise-grade platform. It provides security and reliability that you would expect from such a platform. As Dan mentioned, in some of the servers, data centers, there are about 450,000 servers providing the service. It is comprehensive and connected with the networks that are associated with the platform, and it enables you to work well together, whether in a hybrid environment or completely in the cloud, and you can work from anywhere you want to. It's people-focused and familiar. Basically, one of the things we found is that when people move from one platform to another, they want to be able to use tools that they're familiar with. The last thing you want is to migrate a workload into Azure and then spend the next 6 months trying to get the users to adopt it. This makes this transition very easy because you're using the tools that you're familiar with and that your users are familiar with using. It's flexible and because you pay not by the day or by the hour, you pay by minute of usage. So if you want to spin a dev and test environment for an hour, or if you want to spin a large UAT environment for 2 days, you can do so and you only pay for exactly what you use. Especially in a DR environment where you only, as Dan said, you only need it periodically, only when you want to do updates. You spin that environment up, and in case of a DR, obviously you pay for the full usage of the platform. Now, next slide is all about the next steps. So if you want to take this further, if you want to use Azure as a case study, or if you want to try a pilot or a proof of concept, there are potentially several ways of doing it. What we offer here is a 3-stage approach, which ultimately would fit with what you want to do or how large is your environment you want to test. The first step is to actually do a 1-day workshop, and that would really just cover the benefits of using Azure. During that day we'll explain how it all works and we'll work with you to find suitable workloads that we can move to the cloud. Then the stage 2 goes a bit more deep dive. So in addition to the 1 day's workshop, we'll actually try a small trial. We talk to some of your employees and I try to understand some of your business applications or solutions that you might want to consider. And stage 3 will be actually where we actually do a development or we migrate a small application over to the cloud. Can be a SharePoint base, or could be a media solution or a mobility solution, or even SQL workloads. We can do any of that depending on your requirements. And I think we finished now. What I'll do is I'll pass you over to Sarah and also open the forum up for any questions you might have.
Lovely. Thank you very much, John. So yes, as John just said, if you do have any questions, then please do pop those in the questions box if you haven't already done so, and we will then go through and answer those. So we've had a question come through which asks, does GCHQ class Azure as external communications and therefore open to warrantless snooping? Obviously a huge concern for sensitive commercial data and customer data.
So this is obviously a question that we hear a lot. Microsoft have put out a very, very strong statement around this, that they will not release any customer data through to GCHQ. It's one of the sort of great myths around at the moment that anything in the cloud is open to snooping from them. It's not a problem whatsoever. All of the data that we store in Azure can be encrypted as well, so even with the best will in the world, if they wanted to, they couldn't. Using services such as ExpressRoute as well, obviously you're going to be having your own dedicated connections into the data centers, which again gets around another vector of attack for that. So I wouldn't be concerned in any way about GCHQ snooping on anything in Azure.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Graham Pritchard has said, can you expand on the details for App Zero?
Yeah, absolutely. So App Zero is a software product which, as John mentioned, allows you to move legacy applications from Server 2000, Server 2003, running 32 or 64-bit mode up into Azure. The way it works effectively is you stand up a new server in Azure, you then connect that server back to the machine that you want to extract those applications from. It then goes into that machine, analyzes the applications which are on it, and then does something which can only be described as witchcraft, and effectively just sucks all of that application off. So it will suck all of the DLLs and all the executables and all the files off the file system and all the registry keys out of the registry, sucks all of that out, injects it onto the new machine. It understands concepts like Windows on Windows, so it understands how to make 32-bit applications run in 64-bit operating systems. You can then leave that application tethered to the original machine. You can then test that machine in the new environment, make sure everything is up and working. If there are any files or settings that it's missed, as you're using it and running that testing, it will automatically then go and pull that stuff off the source machine and make sure that new machine is all up and running perfectly. Once it's running, you then sever that link. You then dissolve the App Zero container on the new machine, and that app is now running natively on Server 2012 up in Azure. Because of the way that it's designed, it can effectively move any application, so running old versions of .NET or Java or VB6 or whatever this app might be, it will then seamlessly move it across. The licensing is based on the number of servers that you're moving apps from, so you can move any number of apps from that server, and then once you've dissolved the container and effectively baked it permanently into that new machine, there's no additional licensing costs.
And there is also a Microsoft System Center add-on, so you can actually automate the assessment, the migration of those applications. Sarah?
Lovely, thank you for that. And another question's come through that says, can you give examples of how IL2/IL3 level data fits with Azure or the equivalent CIA levels?
Yep, so Azure itself is categorized at IL2 or official now in new money. So anything which is up to and including official can be stored on Azure. If you're looking at moving beyond that to what used to be IL3 or now kind of official sensitive, we have a solution which we're launching in partnership with Vodafone, which uses the same Azure technology, so you can store all of your data in there, which again sort of goes back to that Cloud OS thing that we were looking at before around hybrid type solutions and sitting applications where they make most sense. But we can deal with official and official sensitive data.
Okay, lovely, thank you. So that's all of the questions that have come through today. So thank you everybody for joining us.